This is really interesting because we're talking about fragrances, and the fragrance world is moving really fast. The beauty industry at this point is moving super, super fast. It's hard to keep up with all these things that are happening, from the investment of the road to now we're talking about Jacquemus. So L'Oreal invested in Jacquemus. Jacquemus inked a beauty deal. So, as it says, the cosmetics giant has taken a minority stake in the buzzy French brand as part of a long-term beauty partnership. So, Jacquemus is moving into beauty with backing from one of the industry's biggest players. French cosmetics giant L'Oreal has taken a minority stake in the buzzy French brand, underpinning a long-term beauty partnership announced Friday. The financial terms of the deal were not disclosed. Jacquemus's charismatic founder and designer Simon Porte Jacquemus has carefully guarded his brand's independence since founding in 2009, but flagged last year that he was looking for a minority investor to help the label grow. Now to pause there, that conversation was really big because there was a conversation around when his stores launched that they kind of launched them too early, and there was an issue with the financial side of it, and they were really looking for an investor to take the brand to the next level, to open more stores in key markets and do things of the sort. So this is a conversation that around Jacquemus we've been having for a while, and of course L'Oreal came in and became the company that brought in that investment. Jacquemus is one of fashion's best known names, especially among young Gen Z consumers. The brand grew steadily in the wake of the pandemic, with sales exceeding 270 million euros in 2023, which is huge for an independent brand like Jacquemus, like enormous. But in an increasingly choppy luxury market dominated by conglomerates, the designer felt a deep-pocketed backer was needed to push the business to the next level. Yeah, so in 2023, they did have really good financial performance. Like they said, 270 million euros in sales. That being said, a conversation was had, and I need to see the financials on this, that last year in 2024, it was a bit of a tough year. Not tough in terms of like they made no money, but tough in terms of they had goals of getting closer and closer and closer to being a billion-dollar brand. And last year, they didn't really make any or much progress in going further in that goal. So they had a lot of issues last year, which is why the conversation came in like, okay, we're going to need an investor now. We're now at the point where we need an investor. Otherwise, it's showing that we can't really grow any further or to the rate that we want to grow without an investment from a big company. So that's why the investment came. But anyway, reading on. I value my independence. I want to pass down this company to my children, but I have to break through the glass ceiling by finding the right partner, Jacquemus told French newspaper Le Figaro in October. A push into beauty has been long awaited. In 2021, Spanish fragrance and fashion house Puig took a 10% stake in the company with a view to launch a beauty line. The plan was later aborted, and Jacquemus repurchased the stake the following year. Now that point is really, really interesting because, I mean, when you think of the company Puig, they specialize in fragrances, right? That's their whole thing. You think of, even on their website, they talk about it. Puig registers double-digit growth and recorded revenues of 4.79 billion euros in 2024. So they make a lot of money. When a lot of luxury companies are, declining, a lot of them, yes, that is how you pronounce it. It's Puig. That's how you pronounce it. But anyway, when a lot of other luxury conglomerates are declining, they are seeing a lot of good sales, and they are really, really, doing really well in this industry that a lot of other conglomerates are suffering in. Now, if you look at the kind of brands that they own, just look at what Puig owns, right? You can see it on the screen. They own Dries Van Noten, Carolina Herrera, Byredo, Nina Ricci, Rabanne, now Jean Paul Gaultier. Now, if you look at these companies, one thing that you can tell is that they know how to do a fragrance line because it's their background, right? Fragrances. Carolina Herrera makes loads of money via fragrances. I mean, Rabanne, I don't need to tell you. Everyone knows the Rabanne fragrance line. Jean Paul Gaultier, I don't need to tell you. Everyone knows about the Jean Paul Gaultier fragrance lines. Of course, they have Byredo that they've been pushing forward. It's become one of the really, really big companies as far as fragrances go. Dries Van Noten, their fragrance line is not that old, but, the company really helped push their fragrance line, and it's slowly becoming a very big fragrance line because the bottles are interesting, the branding is interesting. It makes sense in the case of Dries Van Noten as a person, the fact that he loves flowers and has a flower garden and all this sort of stuff, and they're using very unique floral notes in the fragrances, so it makes sense. In the realm of, Dries Van Noten, you have the likes of Nina Ricci, strong fragrance line once again. So they are good at this. I think the only weakness about the company as a whole is that it seems, if you look at a lot of the companies that they own, that when they take over these luxury brands, they kind of discard the clothing and just focus on the fragrances. So the clothing kind of becomes an afterthought, but then they make loads of money via the fragrances. So if you look at, once again, all these brands one by one, Dries, they haven't had Dries for long enough to really decimate the clothing yet, but let's see what they do. But Jean Paul Gaultier, the clothing, apart from the couture shows, which for the most part doesn't sell like that, the clothing is really an afterthought. Most of the money comes from the fragrances. You think of Nina Ricci, people don't really think of Nina Ricci clothing anymore, even though they've had some interesting tenures, whether that's from, Botta to the likes of, was it Harris Reed that was at Nina Ricci? So they've had designers there that have brought interest to the brand, but it hasn't really caught on. But in terms of fragrances, they make loads of money. The same thing can be said about Rabanne. Rabanne is basically at this point seen, even though it still is a fashion brand, it's just seen as a fragrance line at this point. Some people don't even know that they make clothes. So that's, I think, a big issue with this company. They kind of just discard the clothing and they're just like, yeah, we're going to make you a massive beauty company. So it's interesting, going back to Jacquemus, that they initially took a 10% stake and then he bought the stake back. I wonder what his thought process was for buying that stake back. Like, why is that? Did he think that when he had conversations with them, they were just going to throw away the clothing and just focus on beauty, and he didn't really like that? That could be a big reason if you look at the history of the company. But moving on, it says, L'Oreal's investment comes at a pivotal time for the brand as it seeks to sustain momentum in a challenging luxury market. The company opened a flurry of new stores in New York, London, and LA last year, its first international doors. Alongside the retail push, it has pursued an elevation strategy, increasing prices and switching much of its production to Italy. For its part, L'Oreal is doubling down on prestige beauty. This week, it also took a minority stake in Armani luxury fragrance house Amouage, which is a big luxury fragrance house, by the way, like huge, picking up. So one of the biggest, like, quote-unquote niche houses and fragrances right now. But anyway, reading on, the Jacquemus beauty line will be housed under L'Oreal's Luxe division, alongside products under license from the likes of YSL, Prada, and Valentino brands. L'Oreal also owns the fashion house Mugler, which it purchased from French beauty company Clarins in 2020. In a statement from L'Oreal's president of Luxe said, Jacquemus has outstanding luxury beauty potential, calling out its singular brand positioning, creativity, and social media savvy. So now let's discuss. This is all very interesting. Of course, I alluded to earlier when I was talking about the likes of Kering and their beauty division and all this sort of stuff, because of course L'Oreal owns the license to sell YSL fragrances, right? But in the case of Jacquemus, they do not have the resources to launch their own fragrance line in mass, the way that Kering would with their beauty division, or LVMH or L'Oreal or Estée Lauder. They just don't. So they do have to work with a big company. This is if they want to make serious money through their beauty line. They do need to work with a L'Oreal or the sort. So I think from a business standpoint, this is an amazing move from Jacquemus. I mean, of course, they wanted to be independent, and they are independent in the sense that, they still have an independent majority stake. But slowly we're going to see them work more and more with a lot of these big companies to scale, because that's the only way they can really go to, the billion-dollar company. I think that of all these independent companies, Jacquemus is one of the most on-brand companies to have a fragrance line. If you think of when we think about Jacquemus, outside of, the clothing, we think of not the fragrances, because it doesn't exist, but we think of like the south of France. We think of by the beach. Jacquemus has all these pop-up cafes that they do all over the world, including in France, right? This is a pop-up that they did in Seoul, in Korea. So they always have these like experiences, and luxury is moving more into luxury experiences because people less and less are buying luxury in the form of clothing, and they're buying luxury in the form of experiences. That's why a lot of these luxury conglomerates are investing in hotels. They are investing in, other luxury experience, yachting, all these kind of things, right? So Jacquemus fits perfectly. That is kind of part of the brand. That's kind of what the brand represents. So when you think of the fragrance, I think of, a very light floral, citrusy, nice fragrance for the summer in the hot weather by the beach. That's kind of the vibe of the Jacquemus fragrance. And it works. I think it makes all the sense in the world. And this is why I think, yes, Jacquemus clothing to me is not one of the standouts across the fashion industry. But if we talk about marketing, we talk about business, Jacquemus, and I think a lot of independent brands need to look at Jacquemus and study the brand as a case study, because he makes really, really, really good business decisions, and consistently too. And this is just another one of those. And to go on his Instagram, he made a statement via his Instagram page. So I just want to read that quickly. So he said, 15 years ago, I began dreaming of and creating Jacquemus, with perfume and beauty always part of my vision for the brand. Today, I am proud to celebrate another milestone for the maison we have built together over the years. Merci L'Oréal. I don't know what that means. Lux de créer un ce magnifique projet. French people can translate that for me. But he said, this is just the beginning, Simon. So clearly he's happy about it. They're going to go hard and tough and strong into the beauty division. And I think it's going to work. I think it's going to sell really well. I think it's going to do really, really well. Just so I'll say, to be honest, one of the good business decisions is him being hot. Yeah, but why not lean into it? Like, I always tell people, like, if you're an attractive person, then you should take advantage of it, because it's an advantage you have over other people. Going back to the conversation we were having around Gucci, in Gucci, when we talk about Tom Ford's era, part of the allure of Tom Ford is how handsome he is and how attractive people found him. That was part of the allure of his time at Gucci, right? And so when Gucci thought they could replicate his success just with an aesthetic that didn't even channel Tom Ford really, and didn't really look like Tom Ford's clothing anyway, it just wasn't going to work, because there are so many factors at play. But why not do that? I think if I looked like Chris Hemsworth, I would lean into it for sure. Like, I'd probably have 1 million subscribers if I looked like Chris Hemsworth. So why not lean into it? Why not? I think it's best. Life isn't fair. However, everyone has something that they're particularly good at, and I think you should lean into it. And if what you're good at is just naturally looking good, I think lean into it. So I think, yes, that's part of the success of Jacquemus. That's why, lots of people are obsessed with him, and by extension, the brand. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He can't control that. He looks the way he looks. I mean, I don't support or not support pretty privilege. It's just a thing that exists. I think we just have to accept it. It's just what happens. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just life, to be honest. That's just how life is. And you guys, I want to know, what do you guys think about Jacquemus and his fragrance line? Do you think it would work? Obviously, I think it's a good idea, so that's not really a question to ask. But what do you think the fragrance will smell like? And what do you think that first marketing campaign is going to look like? What do you think he's going to be doing with that first marketing campaign? You guys don't know how hard it is to be beautiful. Lavender everywhere. That would be very on brand, especially because they had that runway show with the lavender field, right? So imagine their first fragrance is just lavender heavy. That would make so much sense. Jacquemus linking with L'Oreal makes sense for his brand more than Puig does, as he does not fit into the Puig catalogue. Yeah. But then again, they would just make the fragrances work because they know what they're doing when it comes to the fragrances. But I think what they would do is they would kind of destroy the whole lifestyle and branding and marketing of the company in favor of selling fragrances. So if his goal is just to make loads of money and set into the sunset, then it would be a good move. And obviously that's not what he wants to do, which is why he bought his stake back. I think it was a 10% stake we read. So, and that shows, this is once again why Jacquemus always wins. And I'll always praise him from this perspective, because he had the foresight to be like, it doesn't work with the brand, I'm going to buy the stake back. How many people do you know do that? Like, how many designers do you know do that? Like, in the short term, just they're like, okay, let me buy the stake back because I don't think it works long term. And this is why Jacquemus does well financially too, because this is a critique I had for Kering. You cannot make short-term decisions for a company and just expect to keep growing all the time. At some point, there are decisions you have to make that might affect you in the interim, because I can imagine paying, buying that 10% stake back was really expensive. And by then the company would have been worth more. So he would have spent a lot of money and, had to just spend that money in the short term. But now in the long term, look at them. Look at the position that Jacquemus is in the long term. Look at them. Look at how much money they make in revenue. And they're about to make way more with L'Oreal now. So that's my issue with conglomerates like Kering, which is why I always critique the way they do business, because they're so like, the next quarter, we need to move forward. We need to make more money in the next quarter. And it's like, you can't run a business like that sustainably. It's not sustainable to just think that every quarter you can grow and you're not even making decisions like really honing in on your business division and really trying to wiggle your way out of all the licensing deals that you're in, and just, losing money in the short term, but spending money on the infrastructure, and then in the long term, really making loads of money. They're just, until they realize that, it's just not going to get better. Until they realize it just won't improve. So yeah, I don't know why it's hard for them to understand that, to be honest. If they want to watch my stream, if you're on the Kering team and you're watching this, make long-term decisions and focus on your beauty side. Focus on the beauty division. That's all my advice. But yeah, let me see what guys are saying about the Jacquemus fragrance. The Jacquemus perfume will smell like popcorn and desperation, like the clothes. Damn, so harsh. I'm a fan of Jacquemus from the start. Less so the clothes, but I am a fan of Jacquemus in terms of branding, marketing. I mean, as someone that, like, I do consulting for some brands, I always use Jacquemus as a case study, like always. Like I have so many stats from Jacquemus that I won't show you on the stream because people pay me for that. But yeah, I always use it as a case study. So that's why I'm a big fan of it, just like following the business side of it. It's so good. Like they do such good business. Such good business. This is also true, by the way. Corporate people don't last long enough to plan long term. If they don't grow, they get fired ASAP. But that's more of an issue with the system, because I understand that a CEO, it's not in their best interest to do long-term decisions, because if they do that, what's going to happen is they're going to lose money in the short term. So the next quarters they might suffer. And then because they suffer in the next quarters, you have pressure from shareholders like, this CEO does not know what they're doing. We've gone down a few quarters, and then they get fired. So basically what a CEO has done in that situation is you've set up the next CEO at the expense of your own job, which no CEO is obviously going to do. So they're just going to make really bad decisions, but that work in the short term. And that's why I always say the system is broken. Companies need to stop thinking about business in that way. And also shareholders need to have a better understanding of the fashion industry to understand that sometimes decisions have to be made where you suffer in the short term, but in the long term you win. And that's how you change the system, because everyone would make money that way if they thought that way. And that's why CEO is such a scam job. It has a shelf life, so you collect the money you can. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that's my conversation around the Jacquemus fragrance and why I think it will work, and why I also think that it's a really good decision that he has decided to go with L'Oreal. I think he's going to do really well. And me being a fragrance head, I won't consider myself a fragrance head that much, but I do, enjoy fragrances and I collect fragrances. I do have a big fragrance collection. So I will be testing out the Jacquemus fragrances when they come out, and I'll let you guys know if I like them or not. So yeah,